So third on our list of power weapons is going to be swords. Unfortunately, kind of like machine guns and, heavy GLs, swords are not very interesting. They're used for pretty much one thing in today's meta when it comes to endgame content, and that is boss damage. Swords are also occasionally used for movement by endgame players, but besides that, they're basically just for boss damage and basically just for one boss, that being Crota, because Crota takes 35% more sword damage compared to every other source of damage in the game, which unfairly skews swords ahead of the rest of the competition, which normally swords are nowhere near worth using. Even if they are a close range weapon, they certainly do not make up for that risk with an increase in DPS. Now, as for the function, you might be saying, why not add clear, or why not a utility weapon or something like that? Well, swords just don't have the damage, like I said, to justify their close range risk compared to something like a machine gun or a pack hunter rocket. Like, why would you use a sword and go up to an enemy, especially a beefy enemy, and hit it a bunch of times when you could kill it in just the same amount of time or even less time with a much less risky option in the form of a rocket, in the form of even a machine gun or a linear? They're just better than swords, so why would you use the sword? In terms of scoring, so let's talk scoring. Swords have quite a few archetypes actually, and archetypes do make a fair difference on swords. I feel like archetypes are something that's relatively, not discussed as much in the community because the DPS testing for swords is rather kind of difficult to do compared to other weapons, but I'll briefly go over how I scored archetypes with swords. First, casters we gave -1 points to because they tend to have very, very poor damage. There's only 2 casters in the game, neither of which are currently available regardless, and both of them have very, very bad damage just as a result of the caster frame itself. Moving on, vortex frames have 0 points. Now you might be wondering, okay, well, vortexes are the second worst archetype. How can that be possible? Falling Guillotine was meta, such and such in Arrivals and whatever. Vortex frame swords, after their 2 nerfs, have very, very, very low DPS and consume a very, very, very high amount of ammo, 6 ammo in fact per charged heavy attack, which is absolutely ridiculous. Bungie definitely needs to revert the nerf that they did to Vortex heavy consumption and also give them a little bit of a buff, given that even if Vortexes consumed 4 ammo per heavy attack, they would still be behind in total damage as well as DPS in general. Vortex frames suffer from a very slow heavy animation, and so they should definitely get a bit of a rework or a buff in my opinion, but yeah, that's why Vortex frames have 0 points. Moving on, we have aggressive frames. Aggressive frames are Titan exclusive. Now, aggressive frames, they actually pack quite a punch. They have a good ammo economy, but the main problem with aggressive frames is that, like Vortex frames, they have a very, very slow heavy attack animation. The amount of time it takes for your Titan to get up from doing that heavy slam attack actually makes it so that spamming light attacks is higher DPS than even using your heavy attack combo to begin with. So aggressive frames, because of their very sluggish animation, despite the fact that they do high damage per hit, they end up losing in DPS to the next frames that we're going to mention in just a second. So aggressive frames get 1 point. Lightweight frames are hunter exclusive. Now these, unlike aggressive frames, hit very, very rapidly but do less damage per hit. So lightweight frames, they do have decent DPS. They're a little bit easier to use than aggressive frames in terms of hit reg, in terms of ammo economy. Aggressive frames can get, lightweight frames can get up to like 80 ammo. So they're very easy to use, very, very fast at attacking. But that being said, their DPS is not crazy high. The only reason, in fact, that I gave them 1 point instead of 0 is because they have a light heavy aerial attack combo. Some of you may have seen this mentioned on my channel or featured on Prelapse's channel about a year ago. The light heavy aerial attack combo allows lightweight frame swords to do substantially more DPS. Now, it's not high enough to put them up at the 2-point range, but they are decent enough that they compete with aggressives. They do slightly more than aggressives if you choose to do this light heavy aerial combo. However, if you just choose to do light attacks only, or you try to do like 1 heavy 2 light combo, lightweight frames are rather worse than aggressive frames. So it's kind of both ends of the equation here. You can either take the greater risk, do the harder combo, and be above aggressives, or you can, just hit with just light attacks and be worse than aggressive. So that's why I decided to give lightweights 1 point. And finally, for our last archetype on the list, or frame on the list, we have adaptives. So adaptive frame swords, they're famous for not having very good tracking. If you right click an enemy, heavy attack them with an adaptive frame, you're likely to go straight through them if they're relatively small, and you're likely to not do full damage. However, if you do happen to do full damage, if the enemy has a, you know, compatible model, adaptive frames do the highest DPS in the game when it comes to sword archetypes by a fair margin. So I would strongly recommend using an adaptive frame sword for DPS. Most of the swords in the game happen to be adaptive frames, and adaptive frames are not class exclusive either, which fares well for our list, and that's why I gave adaptive frames 2 points for having the highest DPS in the game. So with that being said, I do want to make one small note before we move on to perks. Bequest is a special case of an adaptive frame that has 10 more impact than the standard adaptive frame, and also for whatever reason does inflated health bar damage. So I gave Bequest another additional point on top of its 2 to give it 3 points. I thought that was fair given that Bequest has an advantage in damage that no other sword can lay claim to. So with that out of the way, let's talk about perks. So perks on swords are actually very straightforward and very boring. I went through every single legendary heavy sword in the game, and I found that pretty much all the perks between these swords are shared between a pool of around 10 to 15 perks. There is nothing interesting on swords. Swords are extremely boring, easily the most neglected heavy weapon class of weapon in the game. Yeah, Bungie seriously needs to add more sword perks. It's really bad. It's like every sword has Relentless, Whirlwind, Energy Transfer, Flash Counter, maybe Surrounded, Whirlwind, Vorpal, and that's pretty much it. Yeah, it's like every sword has the exact same perks. Really boring. So the main thing is archetype difference, right? It's really just archetype difference and whether it's craftable or not for like enhanced Surrounded. So we'll get to that. Let's talk about the brief 3 categories. We have ammo, utility, and ammo, utility, and damage. Ammo is basically just relentless strikes. I was considering including Tireless Blade, but Tireless Blade implies that I am, you know, condoning the use of swords for ad clear or killing ads, which I'm not, and I don't think really Tireless Blade is relevant when it comes to what swords are actually used for in endgame content, so I'm gonna leave it at Relentless Strikes. I gave Relentless Strikes 2 points because if a sword does not have Relentless Strikes, notably Throne-Cleaver is the sword I'm talking about here, it does lose out on a lot of total damage, so I thought 2 points was an apt amount of points to give / take away. Next up we have utility perks. Utility perks, again, energy transfer, stuff like flash counter, I didn't include here for the reasons that I just mentioned on Tireless Blade. They're just not relevant for what swords are used for in today's day and age. Now, if for whatever reason Bungie changes swords so they get more ammo, or they're more suitable for ad clear, or they do more damage, and so you might want to choose them over something like a rocket or a linear or a machine gun when it comes to those non-boss contexts, then maybe something like energy transfer or duelist trance or flash counter will become relevant, but until then that's just not the case. So the only utility perk that is relevant in endgame PvE when it comes to swords right now is Eager Edge, and Eager Edge is such a big, you know, such a big addition to endgame content that I decided to give it I think 3 points. Yeah, I think we gave it 3 points because, you know, it's just so, even if you're not a speedrunner, right? Plenty of endgame players, pretty much all endgame players own an Eager Edge sword for a reason. It's, you know, even if you're not doing it to go fast, it's good to avoid conflict. It's good to, you know, swipe back onto a ledge. It's good to stop yourself from falling. Eager Edge does a lot of things, and it's a great utility perk for avoidance and for engaging and disengaging out of combat. So Eager Edge is a great utility perk and pretty much the only relevant one, in my opinion, in endgame content right now. I think some of you have also mentioned Cold Steel. Cold Steel is only available on Zephyr. Now, Zephyr is not a bad sword. It's an adaptive with decent perks, even ignoring Cold Steel, but Cold Steel exists in the damage perk slot, number 1. And number 2, why would you go up to an enemy? Like, if the whole premise of the argument is that you can use it to stun champions or whatever, why would you go up to an enemy and smack the enemy a bunch of times when you can use a normal artifact stun, or an intrinsic exotic stun, or a 3.0 option to stun, or like chill clip? All 4 of those options don't require you to go directly next to the enemy and smack them with a melee weapon. So there's not really a reason for Cold Steel to exist right now. If we ever got a sword with like Eager and Cold Steel, or like Cold Steel and a damage perk, We might have something else on our hands, but for now, you know, even on Zephyr, Cold Steel is just not really worth the points in my honest opinion. So yeah, that's it for ammo and utility perks. Damage perks, I gave them the following range of points. Vorpal is 1 because it's 10%. Frenzy is 1.5 because it's 15%. Whirlwind Blade is 2 because it's a total of 30%. It stacks out at 30, but requires 10 hits to reach that, and you can't interrupt your combo. Surrounded is 3 points, and Enhanced Surrounded is 3.5 points. I also took away a point if a sword has no damage perk, and it doesn't have Eager. If it's an Eager sword, then obviously it's probably going to be used for movement, so damage is not that important. But if it's a sword that has no Eager and no damage perk, then I subtracted a point. Okay, so with that being said, that's all of the scoring information that I'm going to give right now, because swords are very straightforward. It's literally just, does it have Relentless Strikes? Maybe does it have Eager? Does it have good damage perks? And does it have a good archetype? That's like the 4 questions you're asking when it comes to swords. There is literally nothing special besides that. So let's move on and let's actually talk about all of these swords in alphabetical order, starting with Abide the Return. Abide the Return is a Dreaming City drop. You can get it from the Shattered Throne, you know, Ascendant Challenges, all that sort of stuff. This thing is an adaptive solar sword, and you know, I'm gonna try and speedrun through swords. I spent a lot of time explaining how they work, so we're not gonna spend a lot of time going over the perks, because you're gonna get very bored very quickly, because all the sword perk pools you're gonna see today look almost the exact same, even the new swords. Bungie is very unoriginal when it comes to sword perks, okay? So this thing basically has Relentless, and then it has Whirlwind. That's all you need to know. It has Relentless, and it has Whirlwind, and it's an adaptive. So because of that, we're gonna go ahead and put it in the C tier. We're gonna put it in the C tier. It's not bad, right? It just lacks perk diversity, no surrounded, and yeah, that's all I have to say. Okay, move on. Let's see Bequest. Bequest, I mean, a lot of people know this sword to be the best damage sword in the game right now for stuff like Crota if you have surrounded. I mean, yeah, that's basically true. We're gonna put it in the S tier. It has Relentless, it has Surrounded, and it has Vorpal. And that's all you really need to know. And of course, it has that inflated health bar and 70 impact, which is abnormal for a sword, which is why it's at the top of the list with 9.5 points. Okay, next up we have Caretaker. Now, Caretaker is, it's pretty much like Bequest. It's a craftable adaptive frame sword. The only difference is that it doesn't have the additional impact that Bequest does. It's stuck at 60 impact like most adaptives are. And it's got Relentless Surrounded. It has Relentless Surrounded. That's all you really need to know about this thing. Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and put in the A tier. Boom. Okay. Next up, we have Crown Splitter. Crown Splitter is the Titan exclusive aggressive sword. It's a void aggressive sword, unlike the Throne-Cleaver. And it has a couple perks. It has Relentless, Vorpal, Whirlwind, and Surrounded. So it kind of has 2 options. It has Whirlwind, it has Surrounded, for if you're not surrounded and you want to use an aggressive sword. Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and put this thing in the A tier. Where is this thing? Yeah, we're gonna put this thing in the A tier. Okay, let's keep moving. We have Death's Razor next. Death's Razor, Warlock exclusive Void Vortex frame sword. This thing's kind of unique because it has counterattack and damage perks. However, I did damage testing on counterattack, which is something else I probably should have mentioned during the perk section, but counterattack is not worth using. The amount of time it takes for you to get out of your hit animation, block at the right time, by the way, while you're taking damage, and then go in for an attack. By the time you've done that, you've lost the goodwill of the extra 50% you get from counterattack. It's also rather inconsistent, like I said, with blocking. Counterattack is just not worth using, okay? Not worth using. So basically, what are you looking at on this thing? It's Relentless, Surrounded, and Whirlwind. That's basically what you're looking at on this thing. And it's a Vortex, so, you know, Vortexes are not great. Because it has all the perks that you're kind of looking for on a sword, and it does have Enhanced Surrounded from crafting, we're going to give it A tier, but, you know, that's kind of a tentative A tier. Hold on, let me close my game. Let me close my game real quick. Okay. So yeah, that's kind of a tentative A tier there. It's, you know, it's kind of just fine. It's definitely the best Vortex in the game, I should say. It's, you know, it's like a better version of Guillotine. But besides that, it's really nothing special. Okay, next up we have Eternity's Edge, another class exclusive for Warlocks. We got that solar, it's basically, yeah, it's like a solar Death's Razor that's not craftable. This thing also just has Relentless Surrounded. Yeah, no Whirlwind, just Relentless Surrounded. So I think we went ahead and put it in the C tier. Where is it? It is over here. Yeah, we went ahead and put this thing in the C tier. Reason being, it's a vortex, doesn't have enhanced surrounded, and it doesn't have whirlwind, right? You'll notice, hey, that's not very different from Death's Razor. Why is it 2 tiers under? Again, swords are not very different, okay? Even the swords that came out 2 years ago have basically the same perks as the swords that come out, you know, that came out like last month, okay? So there's the difference between like an A and a C tier and even an A and a D tier sword here is going to be very, very minimal. Don't expect much difference here. I'm just going to tell you what's the best marginally, okay? And it's going to be Bequest, okay? Just to not to spoil anything, okay? So Falling Guillotine is up next. Falling Guillotine, you know, a lot of people love this thing from back in the day. Basically, we're just looking at Relentless, Surrounded, and Whirlwind. Relentless, Surrounded, Whirlwind. Those are kind of like the 3 swords perks you're kind of like looking at most of the time. So Falling Guillotine, we're going to give it a B tier. Solid B tier. Doesn't have Enhanced Surrounded. That's pretty much why I didn't get A. Okay, pretty simple. All right, let's go to Geodetic HSm. This sword's kind of cool. It has that Nadir Focus origin trait that a lot of people have been kind of talking about. That being said, Nadir Focus does not see actual use in anything when it comes to actual like movement tech, and speedrunners don't really use Nadir Focus at all. So it's cool. It's cool and all. You know, it's an interesting concept, but it's not like Eager. I'm not going to give it any points for that. So let's actually analyze it in terms of just being a regular sword. This thing just has a Relentless Whirlwind. It's a Relentless Whirlwind adaptive. That's all I have to say about it. So it's basically the same thing as a Buy the Return. They're essentially identical. So we're going to put them right next to each other because that's where they belong. All right. Next up, we have Goldtusk. Okay. So Goldtusk, I might get a little flack for this. I originally shilled for the sword quite a bit when I did some damage testing with it. Mostly because I was using incorrect values for Airborne Heavy and Airborne Light. This has since been amended, and if you check my spreadsheet, we have the correct value for the Aerial 1 Light 1 Heavy combo that I was talking about earlier in streams. Prelapse has a video on this subject matter that you should probably check out if you're interested. But basically, you can jump light heavy repeatedly with this weapon and do very, very fast sword combos in the air. That being said, even on bosses where you can do that aerial combo, Goldtusk and lightweight frames in general still do less damage than adaptive frames. So that is something important to know. They still do less damage than adaptive frames, even with that risky / situational combo. So as a result, you know, this thing, again, doesn't have the best perk pool in the world either. It has what? Relentless, and it has Whirlwind. That's basically what you're looking at. So we're going to give this thing a solid... I believe we left it in the C or the B tier. I think it was a C tier. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and put this thing in the C tier. Yeah, it's fallen off quite a lot. This thing is... It's basically like you can take more risk and still do less damage than the top options on the list. And if you decide to take no risk and you just do a regular light combo or just light heavy combo, you're gonna do less damage than even vortexes. So yeah, lightweights are pretty bad, not very good. And so Goldtusk is going to fall into the C tier. All right, let's move on to one of our Eager swords, Half-Truths. So Half-Truths is basically the non-damage perk version of the Eager Edge sword. It has Relentless, and then it has Eager. It has Relentless and Eager, which is like, that's fine, you know, it's whatever. No damage perk, but it's a movement sword. So, you know, for movement's sake, we're going to put this thing in the B tier. Certainly more useful than anything in the C tier. Because it's a movement sword, but it doesn't, you know, doesn't do good damage or anything like that. So we're probably gonna, you know, we're gonna place the purple sword higher, but we're gonna put the blue sword there for now. That's where Half-Truth is gonna go. Let's go to Hero of Ages next. This is, I believe, yeah, this is the Grasp of Avarice sword. This has Relentless, and then it has no good damage perk. It has One for All, which is like an add clear perk, chain reaction, add clear perk, On Guard, active for 1 attack, and then Assassin's Blade, which is like a sort of roaming add clear perk. So again, no damage perk. That is relevant for boss damage. It's basically just Relentless. We're gonna put Hero of Ages in the D tier. I don't think anyone was surprised by that. It's also a vortex frame, the second worst frame in the game. Casters may as well not exist. There's only 2 of them, so yeah, second worst frame in the game. All right, let's go to Honor's Edge. Honor's Edge. This one was actually like a bit of a surprise for me because this one's actually quite an old sword, right? Quite an old sword. But it has Relentless. It has Surrounded. And yeah, it has Relentless and Surrounded, which is pretty decent. That alone, we're going to put this in the B tier. We're going to put this in the B tier. Doesn't have Whirlwind, doesn't have Enhanced Surrounded, so it's not going to get spawned in A tier. But it is an adaptive, you know, best archetype, has Relentless, has Surrounded. Not bad, right? It's like a budget bequest. It's like a budget bequest. All right, next up we have Just In Case. Just In Case, I believe this is a solar adaptive. Yeah, this is a solar adaptive. It's a you get it from fishing. Get it from fishing. That's awesome. Who doesn't like fishing? Anyways, this thing has Relentless and it has Whirlwind. And you know, nothing else really of note, I believe. So yeah, this thing's gonna go in the, I believe it goes in the C tier. Yeah, it goes in the C tier. Goes in the C tier. Look at that. I mean, these three swords are essentially the exact same. Relentless Whirlwind, Relentless Whirlwind, Relentless Whirlwind. All three of them are adaptives. Yeah, like I'm telling you, there are literally swords that, in terms of damage, in terms of like what you use them for endgame content, like how you use them for endgame content, they're like the exact same sword. Like there's like probably 5 swords in here that are like the exact same. Like swords are really boring. Okay. Anyways, yeah, let's keep going. Dude, this is easily gonna be the most boring tier list. I mean, you know, you guys asked for it. You guys voted for swords first before rockets and linears for some reason. So here I am tiering swords. Yeah. Okay. Whatever. You know, I guess we have to be comprehensive, right? Let's move to Nasreddin. Okay. This is an adaptive arc sword. It's Relentless, Surrounded, Whirlwind, which is good. That's good. That's the 3 perks you're looking for on a damage sword in our year 2023. Which means, yeah, this thing, we're gonna put it in the, where is it? This thing, right? Yeah, we're gonna put it in the S tier. We're gonna put it in the S tier. It goes below Bequest because it doesn't have Enhanced Surrounded, but it does have Whirlwind, and Bequest doesn't have Whirlwind. So if you wanted a decent Whirlwind sword, for example, a lot of people use Falling Guillotine with Whirlwind on like Crota. Instead of Falling Guillotine, you could pick up an adaptive and do more DPS, and an adaptive with Whirlwind would be Nasreddin. It's really weird. Swords are really weird. There's a bunch of world drop options that have the perks that you're looking for on a sword with no downside. So yeah, they're Nasreddin, a world drop sword, is an S tier. Yep. Okay. Yep. Yeah. All right. Hi, man. Swords are great, man. Oh yeah, this next one's gonna be fun too. Negative Space. Who remembers Negative Space? You guys probably just threw this thing away because you know it's Negative Space, right? But this thing has Relentless, it has Surrounded, and it has Whirlwind. So, and it's an adaptive. So surprise, surprise, it's going in the S tier. Yeah, it's yeah, it has the 3 perks you're looking for on a sword, and it's the good archetype. So it goes in the S tier. I mean, yeah. This is such a weird list. I did not expect to be putting like Negative Space in the S tier. Speaking of S tier, yeah, Night Terror, an adaptive frame. Let's look at its perks. It has Relentless, it has a Whirlwind, and it has Surrounded. Yep. Yeah. Yep. That's going in the S tier. Yep. These 3 are like the exact same sword. They're like the same sword, just copy pasted. They're just copy pasted. Man, this is so weird. I mean, part of the reason for this is because Bungie made adaptives the default frame for swords, and then, you know, aggressives are special, and vortexes are special, and, you know, lightweights are special. But at the end of the day, the sword archetype that does the most damage is adaptives. And then they gave adaptives, a bunch of them, the exact same perks. So you're going to see a bunch of really weird swords in the S tier, but these all do good damage. Like, they all do the best damage in the game, which is really weird, but you know, that just goes to show how underdeveloped sword diversity is. Like, you know, it's so boring. It's so boring. Okay, anyways, let's move on before I fall over and fall asleep. It's quite late right now. Quickfang. This is basically Goldtusk with no good damage perk. It has On Guard, so your first heavy attack can have a 30% damage increase. How exciting. Anyways, On Guard, D tier. Yeah, I don't have anything to say about this thing. No damage perk. It has Relentless, but no damage perk. That is useful whatsoever. So let's move on. We have Razor's Edge next. Razor's Edge, this is a Vortex frame sword from the Iron Banana. And yeah, this thing's best damage perk is Frenzy. So 15% instead of Whirlwind Blades 30 stack, I guess, total stack. And it has Relentless. So it's like Relentless Frenzy, which is like, it's like Guillotine, but worse. So there's no reason to use this thing. D tier, boom. Okay, let's move on. Sola Scar. Okay, we got to our first caster frame. I don't really think I need to tell you that caster frames go in the D tier. So I'm just going to do it and put it in the D tier. Yeah, caster frames, worst DPS in the game. Their ad clear potential is a joke, and this thing doesn't even have Surrounded, so it goes in the D tier. All right, moving on, we have Steel Sybil Z14. Yeah, that's an interesting one. This is a Void adaptive, and it has Relentless and Whirlwind. And I don't know if you guys remember, but there have been 3 swords on this list before that are adaptives with Relentless and Whirlwind. And so where do we put it? We're going to put it in the C tier, okay? Yep. A very unpredictable list. Unpredictable list we have going on here. Okay, next up, Temptation's Hook. This is a caster frame sword, just like Sola's, except it has Relentless, Surrounded, and Vorpal. Or no, sorry, not Vorpal. It has Vorpal, but it has Whirlwind. Relentless, Surrounded, and Whirlwind. Which means we're going to put it in the... we're not going to put it in the S tier. We're going to put it in the C tier because it's a caster frame. All right, we're going to put it in the C tier. Okay, let's keep going. We have 4 swords remaining, and then this torturous list will be over. Hopefully, you know, next season, Bungie will release 2 swords that are, I don't know, excellent swords, and they have crazy new perks that make swords worth using, and the Crota meta really gets shaken up, or I don't know, the swords release homing rockets that destroy champions or something, so I can have something interesting to put on this list. But for now, I really hope I never have to revisit this list ever again. Anyways, let's talk about the other half. This is the purple sword, right? It used to have Surrounded. I'm not going to include Surrounded because you can't get that anymore. As usual, in these tier lists, we're talking about the most recent iteration of all the weapons that are non-sunset, so the current iteration of the other half does not have Surrounded, so we're not going to include it. So what does this thing has? It has Relentless Strikes, it has Eager Edge, it has Frenzy, and it has Whirlwind, and that's pretty much it. So you're basically looking at Eager, Whirlwind, or Eager, Frenzy, and for that reason, we're going to put this thing in the S tier. It's going to go in the S tier because, you know, it's a movement sword. It's the best movement sword because it has a movement perk and then it has a damage perk. And that's all I have to say. So, it goes in the S tier. There you go. Next up, Thin Precipice. Thin Precipice. Okay, this is a Strand. This is the only Strand sword. It's a Strand Vortex craftable sword. And this is actually the only sword on this list that has some of these quirky perks, right? I mean, it has Golden Tricorn, which is awesome, you know, and Hatchling, because, you know, I love Hatchling on my sword that I use for making threadlings. Anyways, for those of you that are, you know, not using swords to make threadlings, Thin Precipice is bad. Yeah, it has a bunch of short-term damage perks that are just not relevant for boss damage whatsoever, and it has counterattack, which is, again, not good. So, yeah, we're going to go ahead and put this thing in the D tier. We're going to put this thing in the D tier. I'm just going to slap it randomly in the middle there somewhere and leave it to rot. Okay, 2 swords left. 2 swords left. We have Throne-Cleaver, which is... Oh, yeah, it's class exclusive, so Light GG puts it up here. Throne-Cleaver is basically Crown Splitter, except it has Enhanced Surrounded, and it doesn't have Relentless Strikes. Losing Relentless Strikes is kind of a big deal. Enhanced Surrounded is also nice as well. So I'm going to go ahead and put Throne-Cleaver in the... I think I put it in the C tier? I think, okay, scoring-wise, the scoring system put Throne-Cleaver in the C tier. In shorter phases where you don't need Relentless Strikes, this thing would probably go in the A tier. But yeah, the scoring system put in the C tier. In my mind, this thing probably deserves to be at like the top of B tier, but I'm just gonna stay consistent with my scoring system here and put in the C tier. Also, it doesn't really matter because you shouldn't be using Throne-Cleaver anyway, but regardless, I'm gonna put in the C tier. Next up, finally, we have Zephyr. Okay, we have Zephyr. Zephyr is the Dawning Sword. It's the only stasis sword in the game, I believe. Yeah, it's the only stasis sword in the game. It is Cold Steel, but we're going to ignore Cold Steel, and we're going to talk about the fact that this thing has Relentless, it has Surrounded, and it has Whirlwind. And it's an adaptive. So you know what that means? I mean, I'm sure you've heard this before. Relentless, Surrounded, Whirlwind. That means it goes in the S tier, just like the other 3 swords in this tier that have the exact same perks and archetype as this weapon. Okay, well, I hope you guys enjoyed that very exciting list. Basically, this list is Bequest because it's Bequest. It does a lot of damage. We have the Purple Eager Sword because it's the Purple Eager Sword. We have 4 of the exact same sword, and then we have 3, you know, whatever swords. We have 3 more whatever swords, and then we have a bunch of swords that that are the exact same down here, you know. And then we have, you know, caster frames. You know, caster frames. We have some vortexes that suck, and then we have, you know, a lightweight that has no damage perk, and then, you know, yeah. So yeah, I hope you guys learned something. I don't know if you didn't know how swords work for damage. Yeah, this is how. I mean, this is basically a video where I tell you about the sword damage testing that I did and then translated it into a list. And my damage testing said you should use Bequest if you have Surrounded. If you don't have Surrounded, then you should use any adaptive frame with Whirlwind. So you can use this guy, or you can use this guy, or this guy, or this guy, or this guy. And then if you don't have that, then you can use this guy or maybe one of these. And then you should probably not use anything below this. And that's it. So just A and S tier, ignore B, C, and D tier. Okay, thanks for your time. Next up, I think you guys voted for rockets. So I think we're going to do rockets after that. And then we're going to do linears. And then I'm going to make an overall heavy weapon tier list, which is probably going to be less interesting than the special one because it's fairly obvious what heavy weapons are good and what are not. But yeah, we're going to make that video. And then yeah, and then I'm probably going to do like exotic weapons or something. So yeah, I'm actually quite excited to do the exotic weapons video. So look forward to that.